In this episode, Devin Tomlinson shares his journey from being events manager at Billy the Bums in Durban to becoming global brand ambassador for Whitley, Neill Gin and Dead Man's Finger Rum at Halewood Artisanal brands in the UK. Devin shares his journey with us and gives us some insights on global drinks trends. My name is Holger Meyer and this is DrinksWorld. Devin Tomlinson, welcome to the show.
Hi, Holger. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yeah, and you in a cab in London, and I'm in my chilled office in Kloof. Our paths crossed in Durban in the trade. You started as a bartender at Billy the Bums, and now you're the global brand manager for some beautiful brands. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think obviously quite unique story. Obviously starting in Durban in South Africa, running a lot of events, hospitality, a lot of B2C engagement, especially running my own events company and starting up my own gentleman's club or spirits club, which was more of a networking opportunity for me to understand a bit more of the market. I received my first kind of opportunity in 2014 with Hellwood through all my events and bartendering background at Billy the Bums and doing some pop-ups around Durban. Okay. I got kind of everyone wants 2 years, 3 years of experience and, in the industry before you start. But I kind of just, I think, bludgeoned my way into a position saying that I'd, be the best salesperson, within it was actually Blue Sky Brands, Holger, the first one, I think, when we crossed paths. And a simple case of the story, everyone wants 10 years of experience with, all the credentials. But how does someone get into the industry to start? Where does that experience come from if you're not given a lifeline? So, I think it was just putting my foot forward that I had the experience, a unique experience in the industry. And I wanted to project that onto some brands and grow them as quick as possible in a very strong market, KZN. So that lifeline came for the Durban July in 2015. I do remember 2014 actually. Sorry, and that kind of progressed me out of the bar scene. The background of running, doing cocktails and shows and late nights and running a nightclub as well in Stamford Hill Road, Tokyo nightclub as well, in a marketing capacity. So I think I had a very unique adaptation to different consumers. Main market on a Thursday, students on a Wednesday. Your standard consumers on a Friday and Saturday. So I had a great introduction to how multiple consumers and their needs with regards to drinks, how they vary, they variate between different products, how often they consumed, what their price sensitivity is. So there's a lot of learnings that I don't realize I was actually getting through that whole process. I was just, really enjoying that whole consumer B2C led side of the industry. And then through some really strong brands, Cruise Vodka. Yeah. I think we all remember that. I know Distil's done very well with the brand now, but it was great to be part of that, growing that initially in South Africa. The White and Mackay range, so Glenbronach, Ben Riach, White and Mackay whiskey, and then some interesting liqueurs, the Magnums, and obviously the rest of that liqueur range that they had there was the starting blocks. Yeah. Working in a part retail off trade role, part on trade. And that's kind of where it geared up all my learnings and network with the likes of Pick and Pays and Liquor Cities and Liquor Runner, Ultra Liquors, Panji Vans and Simon Roth at CNB, Boffa. I think just that whole network of understanding how booze was, kind of distributed in KZN was an eye-opener for me through that retail sector. And I learned very quickly there was no blueprint. There was no kind of management and that. So I think that was the best way to learn, getting thrown in the deep end to start. I learned very quickly without a, kind of a cheat sheet on what to do. And from there, I kind of got a lifeline to Halewood just as an opportunity because of the good work I did with Blue Sky Brands over a 9-month period and growing the brands extensively in KZN. And through that, got offered a lifeline into Hellwood. And we all, obviously, everyone knows, I'm sure, about the Hellwood portfolio, the king of RTDs and South Africa, one of South Africa's biggest brands, Red Square, Caribbean Twist and all those kind of RTD-led commercial products, but they were transitioning into artisanal spirits. And that's kind of where I came into the picture. Coming from that background, they wanted me to, with my network, grow or develop their artisanal spirits portfolio. So ironically, through my hospitality and events, I met with my future but now ex-boss. And he employed me with an interview on a cell phone outside Waxy O'Connor's in Westville, which was quite interesting. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the journey started. The South African piece, obviously KZN, knowing that KZN is a quite a vital cog in the wheel with regards to spirits sales and brand development in South Africa. We put a lot of focus into the Red Square vodka to start.
Mm-hmm.
We were tasked with eating into the Smirnoff 1818 and Russian Bear market in I don't know if you remember those days.
Yeah.
Right in the beginning, just because the RTDs were starting to kind of plateau out.
Yeah.
The Smirnoff, the Red Square Ice and our Energizer in terms of that portfolio, and we're looking for other avenues of how to grow portfolio. So that's kind of where the Gentlemen's Club came into fruition, and I used that as a platform to grow Whitley, Neill and Pogues. I know you remember Pogues Irish Whiskey in West Cork in those days. And our first kind of exhibition of launching those brands was through these premium gentlemen's evenings that I did across KZN, the Oyster Box, Chairman, and all these, kind of, I want to call them top tier on-trade venues that wouldn't have listed the brand unless we brought some value to them. So we used other avenues, or I tried to use another avenue to get listings. And through that and my relationships with Blue Sky, we managed to do quite good work on the Hellwood portfolio. And with my eventing background, it was quite easy to execute some very strong activational pieces, listing agreements, outdoor events, the likes of Durban Days and Botanic Gardens events and, kind of these like really niche events that potentially normally cost quite a lot of money through my relationships. And then I got offered an opportunity, I remember quite vividly, my boss phoning me and saying, listen, the CEO is coming down to Cape Town in 6 weeks. We need to grow Whitley Neill in the home of the brand. We need you down there. How do you feel going down there? And I was like, great, I would love to. I was in Durban North. I remember I was near the Lookout, actually, in Durban North there, going into Porter's, which is one of my main accounts.
Yeah.
And Mark Porter, I was sitting with Mark Porter and they phoned me and he said, how about you in 48 hours? Why not? So I kind of packed my life up in Durban. My family's still in Jan Hofmeer Road in Westville. And I packed the life up and went down to Cape Town, bunked in with a friend in Batencamp Street by Parliament. And and then kicked into gear for an 8-week program to grow the brands across all the best on-trade in Cape Town. And we went from roughly about a handful of listings, I know, throughout the town to we got to 180 listings in 8 weeks across the Cape portfolio, which was great. Obviously there was a huge effort, for my CEO to see that. And, he subsequently took us to dinner and was quite impressed and, very happy with us and wanted to offer us incentives or additional bonuses. But I thought another avenue. I tried to be a bit blunt with him, and I said to him I wanted to have a conversation with him about progression. So I thought the best place to do that is on a level playing field, and I took him up Table Mountain. Obviously, being quite fit already, I was running and training, and obviously keep a balanced lifestyle between drinking a lot and working in obviously NPD and R&D as we call it. I took him up Table Mountain, I remember in December at 11 a.m. on a hot summer's day. And now he's a, early 60s British, slightly unhealthy CEO. And I got him halfway up the mountain and I felt like I might lose him at some point. And when I got him onto my level and we started having quite a level conversation rather about work, just about life and, progression and where we want to go and what's his ambitions with the brand and what's my ambitions as an employee. And we got quite connected up there on Table Mountain and basically gave him an ultimatum and said if he wants to make it up to the top and finish, he's got to take me to the UK. Otherwise, he can get up by himself. And at that point, he didn't have any cavalry around him or any the directors to back him up, in terms of his army, as we would call it. So for the first time, I think I was one up on him. And he said it took balls to do something like that. And 2 months later, I got a phone call in February, and I got offered a role in London. And that's a massive step for anyone in South Africa, which we all know. And I think just obviously the lack of working for a company that's international. There's a South African business which was strong, an opportunity to move internally with the company to the UK. Grandfather being born here, so I do have ancestral visa, but it was quite tough. I'm sure even now it gets progressively harder to move over if you don't have an opportunity. Moving with the company was an experience. I remember that quite vividly in 2018, and I remember communicating with you as well before that happened. But going from Durban to Cape Town to the world is quite a jump. I think 2018 was an interesting time. I remember quite vividly, it was July that I actually moved over. It took me about 3 or 4 months to get everything together, packed up my life, and I moved to London. I was given about 6 months until they opened up the map and they said go. In the business, early 2019. So I had 2 years to grow the brand globally. Now we're in 132 countries. We've got 9 international offices. Obviously through COVID and everything, 3 of those have unfortunately shut, but they are getting revisited. Going forward, we've set up two Whitley Neill bars, 3 distilleries, and a global operation. Not just a London-centric, South African-centric brand. It's now become a global brand, and I've, through that whole process, I think grown, adapted, developed a unique set of skills that have been used across the portfolio. Not just my passion for gin, but I now represent the rums, the whiskies, the whole portfolio. So all 43 of our artisanal spirits. And obviously now through that also with WSET have become basically an educator too in terms of the spirit space, which I'll obviously be exercising quite soon internationally. So not only representing the brands, but just the travel, the education. I mean, the best education we know is travel. And I think in the alcohol industry, that's probably the biggest leveler. Going into a different market completely, not knowing anything, not knowing anyone, and setting up a business and getting distribution and sales and developing a network. The world becomes a small place and you've got a strong network. And yes, I think, COVID obviously did put a bullet in a lot of things, but there's a lot of, through adversity comes a lot of prosperity. I think there's a lot of opportunity now, massive opportunity. I think the industry is yearning for development and new people, and obviously a lot more dynamic people. I think there's no longer one job for one person. I think adaptability and triple hatting is something that's kind of par for the course now in our industry. You've got to be able to put your marketing and sales hat on, your brand development hat on, and then at the same point in time have your commercial hat on, to make sure it makes sense for the business. So it's been a very holistic experience, and I think it's 4 years in July.
What a ride, eh?
But what a ride, yeah.
So how much of this is got to do with the whole gin revolution? I mean, that must have just propelled the business onto a next level, and somehow they were quite well prepared for this, where other people might have been caught offside.
Yes, I agree. I think we speak about a gin, the gin revolution being a modern day gin revolution that I think came from 2 categories of gin rather than the actual category itself. Because London Dry, through that whole process, periodically grew just by the sake of the pie getting bigger, not because more people were drinking London Dry. But it's through high strength flavored gins, so compound gins in the category, and then obviously pink gin. The biggest and the most iconic will probably be Larios in the early 2000s. That drinking occasion was a massive thing. So I think the occasion of when and how and with what, the perfect serve and the mixes and the aesthetics and the visual was a big thing, especially with that pink gin consumer. But the biggest thing was the experimentation of the category. I think we saw, people don't ask if Tanqueray is green or Bombay is blue, because they understand the category. those people that drink that brand. But people that drink our Whitley Neill flavors, ask if the liquid's purple or red or orange. And I think that just dictates who's come into the category.
Yeah.
These experimenting consumers, visual consumers. And I think the revolution was a number of different things, but I think it was a lot of it was the growth of mixers, the growth of new consumers, the growth of social media. I think social media propelled the gin revolution immensely. I think the whole idea of beautiful garnishing, beautiful drinks, the accessibility through social media, I think made it very easy for gin brands to promote themselves without having to go the hard liquid to lips, on the ground as we normally did. But I think more importantly, it was people just wanting something a little different. People were tired of vodka. I think, there weren't brown spirits in a lot of markets are not accessible. Whiskey and rum, they find it a little bit, I think they find them a little bit strong, a little bit sweet as well. But again, these consumers that are drinking this are more wine, vodka, and champagne drinkers that it came into category that we found. And a lot of bourbon consumers from a male perspective was the biggest influx in 2017. And that's kind of what catapulted it in 2017 was, I think everything came to fruition. And thankfully, we were ahead of the game. We were the first gin brand that produced a high-strength flavored gin in the 2017 period. And that was our rhubarb and ginger, Whitley Neill. We had made our blood orange vodka. We had made our quince Whitley Neill. So there were two other flavors, but the one that really broke through, and the reason for that, Holger, is also because rhubarb is a quintessentially British flavor.
Yeah.
And I think that balance of sweetness and spice with the ginger was just something that touched on a lot of homage. I think gin is a very nostalgic product. And I think if it touches on a certain level of nostalgia and homage with certain markets, we find it drives huge volume growth. And I think with all of those and people experimenting, it ticked all the boxes, and that's where Whitley Neill got onto the map, in 2017 with its flavors, not its original. And the original's been around since 2003, but the brand only became a global figure in 2017. So it's just ironic, it did take quite a lot of time. And a lot of that was actually South Africa. It was our experiment with protein hibiscus, that purple bottle that we did with Jazz and my team in Cape Town, that we started seeing a new consumer, people looking for our bottle on the back bar. No one knew what Whitley Neill was, but they knew the bottle. And it just showed me there was a demand and a need for, I think, a new way of looking at consumers. I think it was the gin category is very one-dimensional. And I think it opened up a new palette of gin drinkers. That's kind of what we were going for. And now I guess the category's exploded. It's very saturated. And I think the UK being one of the leaders globally on category, I think we are seeing a slight decline, I would say, or increasing at a decreasing rate, because I think consumers are now confused about what is actually gin and what is not. I think there's so many in the category and there's so much saturation that I think consumers are now either reverting back to London Dry, or if they're not London Dry drinkers, moving back to flavored vodka or alternative categories like tequila, which is coming through as well here on a smaller scale. Some going to spiced rum or flavored spiced rum. But we are seeing consumers now, I think, being tired or exhausted of experimentation, and that's kind of what's catapulted all these NPDs and flavors. How long do you keep a consumer within the category? But our understanding is that these consumers progress on palate, like whiskey, moving up from bourbon to Irish to blended Scotch to single malt Scotch to peated Scotch. We feel that there's a journey of consumer from gin liqueurs to pink gin to high strength flavored gin to London Dry, and then beyond London Dry is barrel aged gin or overproof gin or sipping gin, we call it, which is quite strong in South Africa, Germany, Scandinavia, Australia, kind of these like niche, very niche style gins, off a small base, but at least there's something at the end of category to catch these connoisseurs. So it's been an experiment, and I think Whitley Neill's definitely a part of that revolution. I think high strength flavored gin and pink gin has definitely got the tag for being the catalyst of the category growing in that period. So it was interesting. I think we just caught the wave at the right time. And again, the spiced rum revolution that we've helped here in the UK with Dead Man's Fingers, and I know it's doing very well now in South Africa as well as a competitor in that category. So we've always seemed to have flexibility on our side with regards to the company and products.
Talk a little bit about the Deadman's Finger. Where does that brand come from?
So Deadman's Fingers is a Cornish rum. It was born out of the Rum and Crab Shack in St. Ives. So for any, I guess any listeners that are not or have never heard of Cornwall, Cornwall's like Durban, the east coast of South Africa in the UK. It's just a completely different world, and it's got its own currency, flag, language. It's got its own community and climate down there. It's nothing to do with the UK, to be honest, during summer and most of the year. And I think Cornwall's just it's surfer's paradise. It's outdoor living, adventure, skydiving, kite surfing, hiking. It's a very much an outdoor lifestyle, which is 180 to what the UK is, in most part. So the brand kind of speaks to that adventure seeking. Rum I think is about an attitude, as a category anyway. I think people that drink rum, I have got a very high, high affinity for social environments. Outdoor living, adventure seeking, music, entertainment. I think rum speaks to a unique category, and I think that's where Deadman's Fingers taps into. It taps into the attitude. But it's a Cornish rum that was developed in the Rum and Crab Shack to pair with food. It was actually, initially used as a pairing ingredient for a lot of seafood. The influence of Thailand and kind of Florida with stone crabs and the kind of like seafood and rum culture around the world, especially also the west coast of the US. A guy by the name of Nathan Hayes took that back to Cornwall and set up a Rum and Crab Shack. And the name's quite interesting. A lot of people always ask what is a Deadman's Finger? There's obviously a couple of interesting remarks we normally get from that, but primarily what it does mean is the gill of a crab that you cannot eat. So a Deadman's Fingers are ironically a part of the crab you cannot eat that previously in folklore would as a myth would kill you. But what it did actually do is when ships would kind of crash on the rocks out in Cornwall and the rum would be bootlegged into the southwest of England, they would feed them a Deadman's Finger to kind of bring up the seawater. So it was used to resuscitate sailors. So it's the part of a crab that actually resuscitated anyone that inhaled too much seawater or fear of drowning, ironically. So there is an affinity and a link back to the rum, the rum bootlegging, the black market of rum into the southwest of England. But it's quite fun. It's, we're trying to steer away from parrots and palm trees, but it's more food-led. It's got 6 botanicals that are boiled into it post-production. The core liquid that is in there, Holger, used to be Foursquare Distillery. We have shares in Foursquare. A lot of people might know the distillery very well. We have a brand called Rum 66 with Richard Seal. And then Deadman's Fingers now, because of the volume and the scale we've got it to, it's actually a Spanish style rum from Panama, from a distillery in Panama that we are using. So it is a 2-year-old rum at its base. And that's obviously the liquid that's used internationally now for our spice, which is our top seller, and then obviously the different flavors within the range that obviously plug the different gaps of consumers, cocktails, and then perfect serve strategies.
Yeah, it's an interesting. And how do you see the rum market? Is it picking up?
Yes, we do. I think, when people say there's a spice rum revolution, I agreed that there's definitely an exponential growth and a gap, but nothing on the scale of gin. I mean, obviously, when they say the next big thing is rum, we're not big, no, but the next thing was spiced rum. It currently is still in that, but I think even that too has got a lifespan. And I think what the spiced rum category has done, which is great, is it's bridged the gap between, we call it brown bag rum, the entry level of market, and aged rum. I think there's a huge gap between your rum and coke and rum and mixer, from a grocery level, that's quite cheap and cheerful, to the premium age stated stuff, which is sipping, not generally mixed, but it's collector's items and really craftsmanship. There's nothing in between that, in terms of the market. And I think that's something that we found that the consumer was looking for. The Jack Daniel's alternative, kind of in the rum market. So, for us, it's been interesting. I think that the market's still growing. I mean, we've come out with some interesting cream liqueurs. We've seen a huge growth in the cream liqueur market.
Okay.
So we've launched at Deadman's Fingers a raspberry rum liqueur in the UK, which has done exceptionally well. And we've dabbled now in the last year into tequila in the range too, because we felt the brand kind of extends itself. Tequila and rum are kind of into the same consumer. So we've got a beautiful reposado in the range that we released across the UK into Tesco. And through that, 2 other cream liqueurs, a mango tequila and a strawberry tequila that's being released into that cream liqueur market for the brand. So I think the brand, it grew up in Cornwall. Its base is in Cornwall, but our distillery is based in Bristol. We say the brand went to university and got its character in Bristol. Kind of the eclectic, arty, very eclectic side of the UK. And the brand's huge now. It's the second biggest spiced rum in the UK. We should overtake Kraken, which we ironically make at our facility in the UK at H&A in Chorley. Should overtake that by hopefully the end of the year. But in terms of flavors, we're definitely top of the pile in terms of bringing those new consumers into the market. And as I said to you, a beautiful crossover between the Whitley Neill and Dead Man's Fingers. So we've captured, and kept those consumers within the company in terms of palate.
Devin, what trends are you seeing there that you think might end up in South Africa?
I think trends at the moment from here.
We're seeing a bit of rum, we're seeing a bit of tequila.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest trends, as we discussed earlier, is I think convenience and consistency is a big thing we're seeing in the market here, Holger. I think we're seeing a change of consumers' mindsets. People are not asking questions anymore about, the age statements, and there is definitely a premiumization in the category. But I'm seeing, a lot of people, especially venue owners, opting for consistency and convenience. Trying to make sure everyone in the room has got a cocktail in hand. So bottled cocktails, RTDs, park drinking, outdoor drinking, especially with summer, convenience drinking. Taps with cocktails, porn star martinis or passion fruit martinis and espresso martinis are your top 2 cocktails by far in the UK. So you've got the likes of Diageo putting those into, your kind of mid-range bars in the UK instead of making people, shake up cocktails. So, it eradicates Kahlua, for example, and buying ingredients rather, and just straight out of a tap. And, as purists, we're against that, but you can understand from a commercial perspective, the wastage, the consistency, and also we're having an issue with hospitality and staff, especially here in Europe with Brexit and post-COVID. I think a lot of people have moved on out of hospitality. So it's very tough to get really good, competent staff to actually make decent cocktails. As much as it sounds easy to make a mojito or espresso martini, it's actually quite scary how your everyday bartender that thinks they're a top-level bartender can't even make classic cocktails. So I think there's definitely a gap in the market of skills versus people being around. So that's why that's emerged. I think convenience drinking, we RTDs with Dead Man's Fingers are doing very well. We know the market in South Africa is, very strong, but I think there's definitely a premiumization in terms of that category coming, top level brands going into RTDs, better liquids, better flavors, I think quite unique creativity in that space. We're seeing a strong trend here to stone fruit, dark cherries, sloe gin, peaches, apricots, I want to say dark fruits, berries. We're seeing in the Whitley Neill range, especially our raspberry, doing very well. The blackberry, raspberry, dark cherries. So I think it's a little bit more of a winter occasion here, but that dark fruit with white spirits is definitely coming through current as a trend in flavor. But yeah, like I said, I think trends from here at the moment, I think, tequila is definitely behind in the UK compared to SA. I always bark the same conversation that South Africa is, one of the strongest tequila markets in the world in terms of premiumization. People drink high-level tequilas, but will drink entry-level spirits, at a bar. They don't forego good quality stuff. But in terms of the UK, I think cream liqueurs, I think we're seeing a big adaptation on cream liqueurs. I think the cream liqueur market has definitely exploded in people after hours drinking. I think there's a huge education around NPD, and that's good cream liqueurs, not just your entry-level kind of run-of-the-mill stuff.
What about bitter?
Bitters, yes. I think there's been a lot of exploration here in terms of Amaros, so variations of Campari. Campari is no longer the, kind of like the go-to. You have stuff like Pampel and other brands in the market here that are challenging, Campari as an alternative. And I think everyone loves the idea of spritzes. I think hedonistic drinking is, I'm I'm very much against non-alcoholic spirits. As a purist, I guess, I don't know how people can charge that price point, but I understand it from a consumer point of view, being able to go out and still partake in drinking, but not, be liable or you'll put yourself in danger, driving, under the influence, etc. So the whole non-alcoholic market is still doing very well off a small base. But I think there's different ways of attacking that. I think it's more about serves. There's definitely a lot more appetite for very interesting mocktails or lower ABV style drinks. Hence why Beefeater's brought out that 21 in Europe and a couple other products that have emerged in the market. But yeah, I definitely think, Spritzes, lighter, less sugar. People are becoming more aware about the content in their drinks. More hedonistic drinking here in the UK.
And do you think there's a market for hard seltzer outside the States?
I think the market here, especially in Europe, was ready for it. It all came in at once, and now the problem with everything coming at once is it confused consumers too much. And I think there is a gap for that, but consumers now are being saturated by hard seltzers, and I think the hard seltzer market, unfortunately, the bubbles burst. I've seen, I think in the US it's massive. I mean, that Animal in 2019 I saw there with White Claw, LaCroix, and all these brands out there was scary to see how quickly it was growing. And I think we jumped on it here, but the UK palate is actually not a soda drinker. Ironically compared to like South Africa, it's very much lemonade, ginger ales, very sweet. Kind of palate. So that's where seltzer kind of, I think, fell short. I think that the concept was there, but consumers here always fall back into the sweet. It's definitely a level up in sweetness from South Africa, that's for sure. So that's why hard seltzer in Europe, I think places like Germany, Scandinavia, southeastern, kind of Europe, Turkey, Greece, those kind of markets are doing very well with something like grapefruit soda, for example. Something like 3 cents, 3 cents sells more pink grapefruit soda than Coke in Cyprus. So there's certain markets where it does really well. So I think it's kind of targeted success rather than blanket success for something like that. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of your role at Hellwood, you've gone up very quickly. What opportunities are there for you?
So I think next steps are going forward, understanding more of the local UK wholesale and on-trade market. So what I've done is I've moved into a bit more of a commercial position for the last 3 months, just understanding how the pub sector and the on-trade sector is actually mapped out in the UK. Where does the volume come from? Where are the opportunities? How to actually grow a brand in the UK. I think the UK is one of the most complex markets in the world in terms of booze, in terms of developing brands. So, who are the biggest role players? If you get listings at certain wholesalers, who do they look after? What are the biggest groups? And building equity in the UK on brands is kind of what's been the last 3 months. And then, obviously going forward with the company, the international markets are opening up again. We're looking at potentially partnering up with a US company. Okay. So we're going to, in terms of the short term, a lot of opportunity in the US and obviously Europe for us. Germany is becoming a strong proposition in Iberia. So Italy, Portugal and Spain. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of huge progression on the brands there. So there's going to be a lot of work in the next 18 months there. But my focus will be a lot more on home ground. Our new whiskies are about to release all their new liquids. We've got a Welsh distillery, an Irish distillery, and a Scottish distillery that are producing their own liquids that will now be ready fairly soon in the Welsh and Scottish department to kind of push out to trade and start developing a little bit more of a collateral and communication on those brands to build them into international products.
Interesting. Devin, it's been great catching up and I wish you all the best. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us.
Pleasure, Holger, and look forward to sipping on a beer at in Kloof Country Club maybe when I'm back.
Thank you for listening to our stories here online. In the show notes, you will also find a link where you can subscribe to become part of our community and be notified when we upload our latest content.